Okay, as mentioned in the introduction, what we're going to be doing here is setting up our entities to manage this many-to-many relationship. And what we have at the moment in our entities folder is just the app user and the photo. And what we want to do is we're going to give our app user two new collections. One's going to be a list of users that they like, and another one is going to be a list of users that have liked that user. And in order to accomplish this, we need to create a join entity. And what we'll do is we'll typically combine the name of the one entity to the other that we're joining here, but to keep it simple, I'm just going to go for user like rather than app user like. And in here, what we need to do is we need to give it a property for an app user, and this is going to be our source user, the user that is liking the other user. And we'll give this an int of the source user ID. And we'll also do the other side, and we need to specify app user, and this is going to be the liked user, and we'll create an int, and this is going to be the liked user ID. And then what we do is we go to our app user and we add two collections, and let's open up the app user again. And what we'll do, I'll just remove this. This was a nice idea that didn't have the desired effect, so we'll remove that. And what we'll do is we'll say prop iCollection, and this is going to be a collection of user like, and we'll call this one liked by users. So who has liked the currently logged in user? And we'll also add another collection and say iCollection, and again we'll say user like, and this is going to be liked users. Now, feel free to give these names that you can understand, that you can work with, because these kind of relationships, they can be sometimes a bit tricky to get your head around. Like the followers and following relationship that you see in Twitter. Because this is self-referencing, we need a way to identify what these collections mean, and I'm pretty okay with this. This is the list of users that like the currently logged in user, and this is the list of users that the currently logged in user has liked. That's the way this relationship's going to work. What we also need to do is go ahead and configure these entities. So what we'll do is we'll go into our data context class, looking pretty bare at the moment, but we're going to add some configuration inside here now. Now, we didn't add a DB set for the photos because we didn't really need to do anything with them, but we do need to do something with our likes. So what we'll do is we'll add a prop inside here and say DB set, and we'll say user like, and we'll give a table name of likes. And what we also need to do inside here is give the entities some configuration. And the way that we do that is we need to override a method inside the DB context. And what we do to achieve this, we'll say protected, and we say override, and we say void because we don't return anything from this, and then we call it onModel creating. And what we do in here is we pass in a model builder and we'll just call it builder. And because we're overriding this method, what we'll do is we'll just pass into the class we're deriving from, and we get access to that using base. And then what we'll do is we'll just say onModel creating, and we'll pass in the builder. If we don't do this, we can sometimes get errors when we try and add a migration. So what we'll do is we'll work on our user like entity here, and we'll say builder, and then we say entity, and then we pass in the entity as a type parameter of what we want to configure, and this is going to be our user like. And what we'll do then is we'll specify that this has a key. Because we didn't identify a primary key for this particular entity, then we're going to configure this key ourselves. And it's going to be a combination of the source user ID and the liked user ID. So what we'll do to achieve that, we'll say has key, and we'll say k goes to, and new, and inside here we'll say k.sourceUserID, and then a comma, and k.likedUserID, and this is going to form the primary key for this particular table. And then what we need to do is configure the relationships inside here. So what we'll say is builder.entity, and once again we pass in the entity we're interested in configuring. And what we do here is we specify the relationships, and we'll say that has one, and then we'll say S goes to s.sourceUser, and then we'll say with many, and we'll say L goes to l.likedUsers. So a source user can like many other users, is what we're saying here. Then we're going to specify the foreign key, and we'll say this goes to s.sourceUserID, and then we'll configure the onDelete behavior, and we'll pass in delete behavior, and we'll say cascade. So if we delete a user, we delete the related entities. And what we'll do, because the other one is similar, I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to be super careful about what we update inside here. So this is the other side of this relationship. So instead of source user, this is going to be the liked user. And a liked user can have many liked by users. And this is where the naming gets slightly tricky. But this is what we need to do to achieve what we're looking for here. And then instead of source user ID, this is going to be liked user ID. And this is our configuration. Be careful with this, double check and make sure that yours is identical to this, because if you start mixing up these different properties, then it's going to cause an issue when it comes to our queries, and it might cause an issue with a migration as well. And speaking of migrations, let's go and add a new migration. So I'm just going to quit out of my API and shut down that server, always a required step when we're looking at migrations. And then what we'll say is .NET EF migrations add, and we'll just say like entity added, and press return. And then what we see is the migrations created successfully. Let's go take a look at Solution Explorer and see what we got from this. So inside our migrations folder, we have a new migration. And what we're doing here is we're creating a new table called likes, and it just has two columns, the source user ID and the liked user ID. This is just our join table. It doesn't need any more columns than this so that we can run the queries against this. And then we've got our primary key, which is made up of our source user ID and our liked user ID. And then we've got our foreign key properties, and the onDelete method is cascades inside here as well. So that looks just like we need it. And what we'll do now is we'll just restart our application, and we'll say .NET watch run and press return. And as long as we don't get any errors here, which I don't believe I saw any errors, that all looks good. And we can see the table being created inside here, but let's just physically check the SQLite database. So I'm just going to open the database, and we'll go to our SQLite Explorer, and we can see our likes table, and we've got our two columns. And of course, there's going to be nothing in it yet. So what we'll take a look at next, now we've set up our entity, we're going to create a repository specifically for likes, and we'll take a look at that next.